I have something to show all of you, and I think it's pretty cool. This is the new Crane M2s, the new gimbal by Zhiyun, and I've had it for about a month or so I finally feel like I can talk about it and give you my honest review without feeling like I'm talking a whole lot of rubbish. Before I jump into my review, let's jump into what this gimbal is. So, this Crane M2s weighs 549 grams. It is meant to handle action cameras all the way to a select amount of full-frame mirrorless camera and lens combos. It features 6 modes: pan, follow, POV, vortex, and lock mode, as well as go mode, which I didn't really get to test out or really use in any sort of scenario. But it's there, so that's important to note. Similar to the new Crane M3 that was released recently, it also has a light. However, this light is not bicolor, but does come with filters that allow you to change the color and temperature of the light. It also has a button on the side that controls the brightness of the light and is used to turn on and off the light, as well as on the other side having an on and off button. The gimbal also has an LCD, however, unlike the M3, it is not touchscreen and is controlled using the joystick and the menu button on the side. It also has a front-facing trigger that allows you to reset the camera, turn it 180, and enter go mode. The battery lasts 10 hours and features USB quick charge, which means in an hour and I think it was 45 minutes I read, you are able to get back up and use this gimbal fully at 10-hour charge. It also allows you to connect to the camera via USB. However, I wasn't able to test that feature because my camera is a dinosaur and I'm unable to connect it via USB-C. Although something I am able to connect to and this gimbal is fully compatible with is the ZY Play app, which allows you to control your gimbal using your phone, as well as actually using your phone's movements to control the gimbal. Something I didn't really get to play with, but I know is there and does work. The gimbal also features 2 1/4-inch screw mounts, one on the side and one at the bottom, so that you can support it on its legs like I'm doing right now. And there is a combo pack that comes with a really nice backpack that I kinda hate that I love, as well as the phone clamp that I'm using right now. There's 2 things I need to tell you. One is that this gimbal was actually sent to me by Zhiyun so that I could make a video for them. But they have no influence over this review because this is just me letting you all know what I honestly think about this gimbal, as well as things that I noticed that you should be aware of should you be considering purchasing this gimbal or about to click that button and buy this gimbal. And then the second thing you should all know is the setup that I used to test this gimbal. First of all, let's look at the setup that is currently built onto the Crane M2s, and that is my iPhone XR using the phone clamp. And then the second one I can't really show you because it's currently being used to record me, and that is my Canon 750D with an 18 to 55mm kit lens, as well as the KNF variable ND. Now, one thing I did want to test, but I was never able to try out, is the gimbal with an action camera, simply because I don't have the accessories to make my GoPro attached to this camera. But it is possible, and I have seen it on the internet that people have attached action cameras. I just never personally got to use it, so I don't know how it works. So just bear in mind, I'm coming from a person who's used their cell phone and their DSLR to record using this gimbal. So jumping in to the test that I did. Cool, we're gonna do a running test. We're shooting right now at 18mm. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Again, that lock mode just randomly, you know, moving, dragging to the left is kind of annoying. There's definitely some jitter happening from the running. Now, I didn't experience any jitter when I ran with the Zhiyun video that I made, but I was also running less at full speed. We're gonna test it out with 55 full speed. So on the count of 3, 3, 2, 1. Not the framing I want, but I can't really see it. Yeah, the drag is gone. That drag is completely gone. It's very weird. Drag is gone, eliminated. I don't know if that's a 55. The drag is gone, eliminated, completely not noticeable at all. So I think a reset, if you see that drag, just restart your gimbal and turn it back on, will fix it completely, because I had no drag this time. Very strange. We're checking the full follow mode right now, and what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do a shot where I'm tracking in, walking in, and having the gimbal tilt up to reveal the cart. So that is the shot that we're doing. So now we're gonna be testing how responsive the gimbal is in follow mode and how smooth the action is and how good the stabilization is in this mode. So let's try that out now. So we're gonna start on the ground and we're gonna tilt up and we're gonna move it up. Really nice, slow easing action, and it comes to a really decent stop. Now, I think that's a very easy shot, so we're gonna do it again now, but we're gonna do it a lot faster, and I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressive in my movements to see if the gimbal is still as smooth and it still features that ease feature that I'm really enjoying, and to see how good the stabilization is again. So, starting off with the ground, we're gonna go a lot faster this time. The ease feature was definitely there. I do feel like the gimbal was very stable, but I wanna do it again. And now we're gonna go full speed ahead and see how good it is. Heavy breathing because I am slightly unfit. Okay, so one thing I noticed there was that the gimbal did have this drag down as I picked up speed and I tried to ramp the hand up to get the gimbal to tilt up. We're gonna try that again to see if that again appears. Again, I noticed that dip. I don't know if you'll see it in the footage, but I saw the gimbal dip a little bit. And obviously if you see it on the camera, usually most times will appear in the footage. But if you're not doing something super fast and super reckless and super aggressive, not reckless, usually this is doing a really good job. And what we're gonna try and do is get the camera to pan nice and smoothly to the edge so that we start from one side and we end off the other side. So let's go. So we start here and felt very responsive. Gives you that swish. There is a little bit of a delay that I'm noticing with every motion that you do, but that's that ease to make it cool. But very smooth motion. Nothing really wrong with pan follow. Very smooth motion, that ease. There's a little bit of a drag as I'm operating, but it feels nice because that tells me that the gimbal is actually operating, and I like it as like sort of a haptic feedback to my body and telling me what my gimbal is doing while I'm operating. But very smooth motion, working with me as I need it to. If I get really aggressive, there is that ease and delay to make sure that the motion isn't too abrupt and unsteady. But it's very responsive to my motions. Nothing really stopping it, and it feels very, very good. Very, very nice sort of operation. And as you'd expect with a pan follow, the tilt is very nice and locked off. So if you still need a little bit of creative freedom and you want to get a tracking in shot, but you need to be aware in case your subject moves left to right, pan follow is the way to go. And it is very receptive to what I needed to do. If I needed to sort of tilt it away that way, that gives me a really nice dynamic shot. Really enjoying the haptic feedback that I'm getting in terms of the resistance. All right, so now we're gonna do a POV test. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first expose for the sun that's coming. I'm gonna rotate and we're gonna see how sensitive the POV motion is to my gimbal as I am walking it through. Now, our lovely subject for this shot is gonna be this shopping cart here, and I'm gonna try and stick to the circle of the football field that we have here to try and get this to work out as good as possible. So let's start it. Okay, from just a perspective of moving tilt just to try and frame my subject, it is very sensitive here, but now let's see how sensitive it is while I'm actually taking the shot. So let's go. I'm feeling very good about the motion. I am able to control it perfectly. When I need to just shift it up a bit or move it up, it's doing the thing. Right now, very good motion. So yeah, while I'm taking the shot, I'm noticing that the gimbal is actually very responsive to my commands. If I needed to like Dutch tilt like right now, it's able to do that. And it's got a sort of ease to it, which feels really nice because it's not so hard cut as my motion. But the actual general control of the gimbal feels really good. and very responsive in POV mode. Now, if you're enjoying the video so far, I'd like to urge you to like, share, subscribe, you know, all that funky, funny stuff. And feel free to join the Cine Rig film crew by hitting that subscribe button. I will be doing more gear reviews, as well as doing a whole wide range of videos in filmmaking and photography and travel if you're interested in that. So with that being said, let's jump into the things I noticed after using this gimbal for a month. Number one is that with the heavier payload on the gimbal, there felt like there was an ease in and an ease out to the movement that I was doing. So as I moved the gimbal would take a little bit of time to ease into that movement, and then it would ease out, which with the heavier payload was way more efficient and also looked nicer in my opinion. I felt that with this gimbal and the heavier camera and that ease in, the footage looked extremely smooth in the movement. However, point number two is that with this heavier payload, there is the problem that the camera reaches its limits a lot faster, and that can be really problematic depending on the type of shot you're taking. I felt that when I was running, I had to kind of trim back the speed, because if I ran way too fast, those jitters came in. And now you can fix that in post with some warp stabilizer or just image stabilization. That's a 50-50. Some of those jitters might not be able to be fixed, in which case you're gonna get warping. So you don't wanna play that risk, and you just wanna make sure that the shot comes out as best as possible. And now you can mitigate that by asking your subject to run a little bit slower so that you can run a little bit slower, so that the gimbal's actually able to consistently give you the good results. I did a lot of running shots, especially for the Zhiyun project itself, as well as for tests, and when I decreased my speed, I didn't notice any sort of jittering. Now, point number three is, on a lighter setup, calibrating is extremely finicky. You're really fine-tuning to a hair, because otherwise this whole gimbal doesn't calibrate properly. Now, it will be able to handle it if it's not extremely well calibrated, but I'm one of those people who likes to be a super perfectionist. So I was really playing around with that calibration to make sure that the gimbal was as well calibrated so that it would give me the best results as possible. But the gimbal is able to handle a change in weight. I was consistently on my shoots going from 18 to 55, even though I balanced at 24 or 35. I was constantly shifting, and I didn't notice any problem with the gimbal. The gimbal was able to handle it and give me the results without any issue. So you don't have to be perfect, it will still handle it. I'm just telling you something that I noticed. Point number four is that this light is completely useless for anything else besides vlogging. It was meant to be a fill light for vloggers to light up their face, and the ability to control the brightness is fantastic for vlogging. Do not expect this light to light a space so that you can record the space. It's not meant for that, and so it won't do that job properly. Point number five, the color filters are really fun to play with and give you a cool effect. I thoroughly enjoyed using them and shooting with them, although not as much because there wasn't much need to just put colored lights on my gimbal. But when I got to just fuck around with it, it was pretty fun. Point number six is that with my Canon 750D setup, I could not access vortex mode. And now if you don't know what vortex mode is, your camera just spins around and goes from portrait to landscape, giving this really cool effect, and it's really fun, especially for like music video shoots or just for creative transitions. However, with my Canon 750D, I would enter vortex mode fine. However, as I was doing vortex mode, at any point during that vortex, it could just cause an axis lock and that shot would be rendered useless. However, on the phone, never had an issue. So notice that with heavier payloads, that mode might not be functional, and it's the only mode that I noticed any sort of limitation. Point number seven is that I noticed sometimes the gimbal would create a pan drift. Even if it was in locked mode, it would sometimes start drifting. Now, I noticed this once or twice, and it wasn't a recurring, consistent problem that would make me want to drag my hair out, but it was there. And I also noticed that the fix for that is just restarting the gimbal, and that causes the whole problem to disappear. So I don't know if that is a firmware problem or a calibration problem, or just the torque not working to the best of its ability. But it is there, so if you do notice that, just turn off the gimbal, turn it back on. The next point is that on Zhiyun's website, you won't find a maximum payload. And trust me, I have looked through countless pages of this gimbal, as well as countless different articles to try and find the maximum payload. However, you will find a camera list to see if your camera is compatible, as well as the lens they recommend. But I can deduce that the max weight I think this gimbal can handle comfortably and still able to do everything that I've just spoken about is just under 900 grams. The reason why is because my camera with the setup of the lens and the filter weighs in at 884 grams, which means that my whole setup with the gimbal was under 2 kilograms, which is a very nice change of pace than carrying the heavy gimbal. So yeah, just bear that in mind. But I would say that under 900 grams, you are fine and your gimbal will work except for vortex mode, which I've already explained. Now the next point is that whilst this gimbal has grip, that grip does nothing. It really doesn't help. It feels just as bad as the actual plastic, but it does make the aesthetic look good and breaks the gray space. So it looks good aesthetically, does nothing physically. But my final point before we jump into the final verdict for this gimbal is that the battery life is fantastic. With a light setup, you can see runtime of up to 10 hours. But with my 750D, 10 hours was roughly the mark. And the fast charge is fantastic. It allows you to really plug in this gimbal and get ready to go. Especially if you're doing trips where you have the ability to charge this gimbal in between location A and B, you're gonna be able to just keep running it, and that is fantastic. Now for the moment that you've been waiting for, the moment that has kept you at the edge of your seat, that moment that you've been anticipating, is it worth it? Yes or no? The short answer is, if you've got a heavy setup, no. I don't think this gimbal is for you. But I also don't think this gimbal is marketed for you or even designed for you. However, if you're someone who has a light setup, you need a cheap gimbal that is going to overperform the price range and be able to give you stable shots, this gimbal is for you. I really enjoyed this gimbal. Now, whilst there were some things that I found relatively annoying, such as trying to get into POV or vortex mode, felt like a guessing game of pressing the button to see if it worked, even though it says double tap twice. And the joystick is extremely sensitive and calibration is a bit finicky for my over perfectionism. The gimbal still overperforms and is able to handle more than you expect. The gimbal also feels really nice and is really light, and that is why I think this gimbal, if you're looking for something light, something that can easily be taken with you on your travels and give you extremely stable footage, as well as opening up some creative avenues, this gimbal is for you, especially if you're in the range for a budget gimbal. So yeah, that is my thoughts on the Crane M2s. Let me know if you have a Crane M2s in the comments and what you think of the Crane M2s. And if you decide to get one, please come back here and let me know what you think after you used it for a little bit. I'd be keen to see if my advice helped you. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, you know, all that funky, funny stuff. But anyway, if you want to join the Cine film crew and be an OG, please consider hitting that subscribe button right now. Thank you so much for doing that. You're an absolute bloody legend, aren't they? Yes. Anyway, I hope you are gonna have or have had a fantastic day. I love your faces. Goodbye. La ta 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 ta. Bonus points, if you can tell me why I go la da 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 at the end, I'll do something. I'll think about it and I'll get back to you in the next video. But anyway, la da 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 da.